Hey there, and welcome to the Dynamics Hot Dish Podcast, serving up stories and knowledge on Dynamics 365 and the Power Platform. This is what's hot in Dynamics. You're now joining your hosts, Ashley Steiner and Merlin Schweiger.
I'm so excited. So you're probably wondering why we're so giddy. It's because I got Merlin to agree to play another game to start off our podcast this week. You can tell he's really excited. So we drafted. That was fun. We'll probably bring that back. But this time, I have picked an item. That's all I'm going to say. In my head. And Merlin has 20 questions, yes or no questions, that he can ask to find out what that item is. Might sound really terrible if we proposition it that way, but really just Merlin's trying to guess whatever item.
It's just playing 20 questions.
Yeah.
It's fine. It's fine. I got this. I'm totally going to win. I think. I hope.
All right. And I did give you some prep time. So I did tell you about this ahead of time. So I feel like the draft even though we had talked about it, I didn't prepare. I tried to be a little, on the spot. But but for this, I did prep you so you could actually come up with some questions beforehand.
So I do have a handful of questions just to make sure that I have, broad categories outlined. But of course, it's not like I can predefine all of the questions. Okay. Are you going to count them or should I count them?
I can count them. I'll just use my fingers and my toes.
Fantastic. Okay. So I guess, you've already said that it's an object, so I don't have to ask if it is an object. That means it is not a person. But I will check, is it alive?
No.
I'll just confirm it's not alive. Okay, great.
I know where you're going with that one.
First question. Just making sure. Otherwise, I was just going to go straight to Panther.
Making sure it wasn't Panther.
Yep.
I thought about it, and I was like, Merlin's going to get that on the first one.
Yes. Okay. Is it something you own?
Yes.
Is it larger than a bread box?
Like one of those old school from the 80s bread boxes that you lift up. Oh God, could it fit? Do you mean could you fit it in the bread box?
No, is it larger than a bread box?
I'd say it's maybe about the same size.
Okay.
I'm literally counting questions, by the way. I haven't.
Perfect. It's perfect. Is it electronic?
No.
Okay. Does it require maintenance?
No.
Upkeep? Okay. Is it inside your house?
No.
Does it have a motor of any sort?
No.
Does it have an opening?
No.
Is it made of plastic?
No.
Is it made of metal?
It is not. There are parts on it that are metal, but it is not made of metal.
Is it made of glass?
No.
Is it made of stone?
No.
Is it made of wood?
Yes.
Okay, we have a wooden something that is outside of the house, that's only about that big, that doesn't have an opening. Is it a shelf?
No.
Is it a decorative item?
Yes.
Is it I'm thinking now is it a garden gnome?
No. That sounds awesome though. Maybe I should get some garden gnomes.
You probably should get some garden gnomes. Is it a planter?
No.
Is it a stump?
What stump has metal on it? No.
I don't know. You pounded some nails into it or something. I have no idea.
You have 2 more questions.
Is it a figurine of some sort?
No.
Something to support plants?
No. It's 20 questions. What's your final guess?
A wagon wheel. I have no idea.
It's a welcome sign.
Welcome sign. Who has a welcome signs? What are you, like 80 at a campground?
No. Okay, so it actually says, and I should have brought it inside for this to like show on the podcast, but I'll definitely include a picture. It says welcome-ish, depending on who you are and how long you stay. And it's one of the things that I love the most about the outside of my house.
How? There's
Well,
no
I was
way
waiting
I
for
could
you
have
to
ever
say
guessed that.
a hanging sign. I was going to give it to you if you said it's a hanging sign. Like, I was going to get, you know what I mean?
Which I appreciate, but like, I
But
also
you never
didn't
asked, like,
expect
does
that
it
you're...
hang on the house? Does it,
Well,
like, you didn't ask any questions about, like,
why would you have a hanging sign? You're not like a blacksmith in the 1850s that you've got, like, hanging your shingle outside.
I have a porch, and it's, like, on, it's, I'll put a picture up. I should have taken a picture or something. But yeah, no, it's just outside. It's on the stone of my house. There's a nail in the stone, and it hangs on the stone, and it says, and it, like, makes lots of noise in the wind.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. You're so mad right now.
I don't have such a thing. I've never had such a thing.
You don't put decorative stuff outside your house?
Yeah, I put decorative stuff outside my house. I have planters with flowers. I have a wind chime.
See, that's hanging.
That's it. Yeah.
You could have asked if it was hanging.
I could have asked that, but you'd already said that it was wood.
Oh, that's
and
true. There's
my
wooden
hanging
wood
things
chimes.
aren't...
Wind chimes.
Well, mine's all metal.
Oh, yeah. No, there's wooden
I know
ones.
there are wooden ones, but I know. Yes, I could have. I didn't think of it.
You're so frustrated right now.
It's
No
fine.
more games.
But
no more games.
But
is
next
what I'm
time,
taking away from this.
Oh no! Next time we're gonna do 20 questions, but you're gonna have to ask the questions. So we'll see how easy it is for you.
You know what I should have picked? Like my CRM 2011 how-to book that that company in Chicago used to make. You know, the big blue one? You know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm. Yep,
Are they even still in the Dynamics business? I haven't seen them in forever.
They got acquired by EY, maybe?
Okay.
I believe you're referring to Sonoma.
Yeah. Oh my God. It came to me just as. Yep. Okay. I don't know if I still have it. I probably threw it away in one of the moves. Loved that book.
It's a great book. It's a great book. What's our actual topic?
Our topic.
Today?
So totally on a different level of our game, but we're talking about business process flows and how to use them, the benefits. I personally think that business process flows are one of the most underutilized things in Dynamics. I think people completely forget about them, don't use them correctly. So I just think there's a lot to unpack there about, how to use them and stuff. So, Merlin, do you want me to start? I know this was my idea, topic.
I think that you're right that they are underutilized, which is sort of ironic because having spent an awful lot of time in the sales side of the world, I can guarantee that every single demo that shows anything that moves through a process, we show the business process flow in the demo because it looks good. You're like, wow, look at this. And my salesperson can just walk through this on their opportunity, or my service person can just walk through this on their case. And everybody's like, yeah, wow, that looks great. And then nobody really uses them, or they think that they're going to use them, and then they come up with a sales process and they put it in the process flow, and then nobody uses them.
Yep.
So I guess, why do we think that is? Why do people not use them?
Well, I think people don't use them correctly. So even if they are using them, they use it as, I'm just going to put all these required fields up here in the process, and then they can't close an opportunity until they do all this. And I'm like, well, they could just close the opportunity. You don't have to get to the close stage, right?
Right.
And so, and that's frustrating. That's hard as a sales rep to go up to the business process flow. And now you have 10 more required fields to even move forward. So I think education on what the purpose of them is probably the biggest reason they're underutilized. Is people think of it as well, this is the way I'm going to get my people to fill in all the fields that I need in quotes, right? Whereas do you really need that, or do you just need to know when the revenue is estimated and how much it is? Do you need to know that they've identified their competitors? Do you need to know that, or is that a nice to have? I also think that drop downs are like check marks. Like people always say like, oh, I want to check this off. You can't just check stuff off in a business process flow. You can't change drop down. So if you have like a yes, no, you can't just make that a checkbox. That doesn't work. So I think that some of it is just functionality is not pretty. And so they're like, oh, this doesn't look how I want it to, so I'm just not going to use it because it's more cumbersome for people to have to go down and change all these option sets. Also, it's really difficult to make option sets required in a business process flow because whatever the default option is, you can never select that. So if you have a yes, no field, the answer might be no. Right. But you can't move forward until you change it to yes.
And then change it back to no?
Maybe? No, even if you do that, then it's considered unsaved. Oh. I know. So there's just some like nuances where I think that unless you spend time like really mapping out what you're looking for, it can get a little difficult. And I just don't think that people after an implementation, they're like, you know what, I'm just going to throw all these fields on the form and be done. Because it does take some thinking, right? It's not just something you can put together. You have to and you have to have a process. How many people have actually defined a process? You know what I mean?
Lots of companies have defined a process, actually. The question is, does anyone actually use the process that's been defined?
Right. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. I found one of the sort of personal frustrations that I've run into with process flows is you have to take extra steps to keep track in another field of what stage in the process you're in. So you can't just like look at the list of opportunities, for example, and be like, oh, well, show me all the opportunities that are in my qualify stage, unless you've done the work behind the scenes to have the process flow update the stage to qualify so that you can actually see it in the view. That's kind of...
Yeah, because out of the box, there's only like 4 stages. And then if you're like, oh, I actually have a 6-stage process, you have to bucket your steps into the out of the box steps. And then the out of the box steps are the only ones that appear in a field. So you have to create a new field, create a workflow that anytime this, it moves, you have to update it. And it does get, agreed. I mean, that's the first thing I do whenever somebody says they want a business process flow. I just immediately say, we're also going to do this.
Yeah. Yeah, because you basically have to. So if everyone's using them wrong, and the answer is not to put your required fields up there or expect that your salespeople are going to just click through it just to click through it. And I can speak from experience here. I built out a business process flow for our internal CRM at one of my previous employers. And I was the only person that moved it through the business process flow from stage 1 to stage 4, where my process took over because I built it. And it was funny because at some point, one of the other operational staff was like, oh, I just assumed there was an automated process that was moving that forward. And I was like, no, the automated process is my clicker finger because I am manually moving it on all of these opportunities. And she was like, oh, I didn't know that. So what should I be doing with my business process flow? How should I be thinking about a business process flow to make it actually be successful?
Yeah, so I always tell, because sales leaders are usually the ones that you're working with, right, to create the business process flow. So I always say, what does a sales rep need to know at this point in the opportunity to be able to even do the next step? So if I'm doing creating a quote, what do I need to know in the quote stage to create a proposal? So it's more of the what can't I do in the next phase without this information? It's not, hey, let's check mark to make sure that I've done something. It's, no, what is that information? Because I'm going to use it in the next stage. And so that's kind of the way that I've always approached it is, I can't do the next thing if I don't have this identified or if I don't have this information. And so that's the way that I've always tried to work with sales leaders to understand. I'm like, cool, if you want all this other stuff, let's put it on the form. Let's not require it. But in your one-on-ones, hey, I see that you have all these opportunities that don't have this filled in, and this is important. I was like, you can't have a system you can't have a system train people. You need to train people to how you want them to use the system. And so, I've seen way too many times where people add in all those fields, and I always say there can't be more than 3 to 4 things that you have to know here in order to do the next thing. So I say number 1, limit, like never have more than 5 in a stage, because at that point you're just micromanaging. And then you have to train people. You have to train them how to use, like, what the purpose is. Like, why am I filling out fields on the form to then just go up to the process to fill out more fields? You've got to explain and train and do that knowledge transfer of why, like, what the purpose is and how it helps them, right? So, hey, I know I'm in this phase, and I always talk about the funnel and how you spend, like, the majority of your time on the things at the bottom or in the things in the middle, because you're trying to get them to move, and you should be spending the least amount of time on things in the bottom, because they should just be ready to close. And you know what I mean? So it goes back even further than just the business process flow, but it's about time management. And here's how you can identify what opportunities you should be focusing on and how much time you should be focusing on them. Anyways, that's a lot. That's more like sales process than business process flows, but it all feeds together.
I was going to say, you can't
I'm
have
like on a
one
rant
without the
now
other.
of like sales, like how sales teams really should use dynamics.
But I think you touched on some key points there that I want to make sure to highlight. And one of them, you were talking about, like, I shouldn't have to, as a salesperson, like, fill out stuff on the form and then go back and fill out stuff in the process. And that made me wonder, maybe the way to consider it is the stuff that I see on the form is stuff that I'm going to fill out one time, probably when I create the opportunity. And then as I'm working the opportunity, ideally, most of the data that I need to change or update is stuff that's in the process flow that I can change there to move things along. And I don't necessarily have to be filling out fields on both sides.
Yes and no, because like you would track the revenue on the form, and the revenue could change, or the close date,
Sure.
probability. So I think that there are some things on because you wouldn't want to add that to every stage, right?
Right.
And you don't want to
No,
go
that makes
back
sense.
and update it. But for the most part, I agree with you, right? Like you identify like qualifiers or details or, just data, not necessarily how's this going to help me close the deal. That's the point of the process, I would say.
Yeah.
So I would say largely I agree with you.
The other thing that it made me think about is I feel like often the sales leaders are looking at the business process flow fields as this is data that I want as the sales leader. And very few people consider this is data that will actually help the salesperson be more effective at their jobs. Like,
Oh, that's so
is this
key.
is this for the salesperson, or is this for that person's boss?
Well, and that's why I say that's where the training comes in. Because if you, as a sales manager, need data, then you need to be spending the time sitting with your sales rep saying, hey, this opportunity is missing this data and I need it for this reason. You can't have the system force them or train them into doing those things, because they're just going to get frustrated and they're going to complain.
They'll find a way to go
They'll
around.
they'll find a way around the system, and they'll just, so that's where, I always say to sales managers, you need to pull up dynamics on every one-on-one. That should be the focal point of your conversation. And you shouldn't require fields. Like, you should still have data in fields, even though they're unrequired, but that comes from you. The process, I totally agree, Marilyn. It's for the sales rep. Like, how are they going to close this deal? And that's the information they need to close the deal.
Yeah, I think
It's a good way to put it.
makes
I
sense.
like that.
Well, and unfortunately, often in implementations, right, like who's the person who's defining the requirements, and the person who's signing the checks, and the person who's like deciding the software, it's all the sales leader. And so the sales leader is like, well, I want my people to tell me all of these things, and so I'm going to put it on the form and I'm going to require it. It's going to be required. Or if it's not required, then I'm going to automate an email to them that says, you didn't fill out this data. It's like, well,
It's the worst.
like, to your point, really nothing can be better than a one-on-one, like, hey, every week in this conversation, like, we're going to go through the data that you have in your opportunities in our CRM system, instead of, once a month, I, as the sales leader, am going to dump it into a spreadsheet and then make my updates to the data based on what I think is reality versus what I found in the system, and then use that as my sales reporting to, leadership.
Scrub the data before you send it up.
I've seen that even within companies that ought to know better because this is what they do for others.
A couple other things I was going to say about business process flows and why I think they're really valuable is you can take actions or steps at the end of them or even during them. So you can add workflows. You can say, hey, like I need to contact this team or something in order to get this data. When you take an action in the business process flow, it can automate, creating a task for that person or sending them an email or something. So it takes away some of that manual work. And to your point, like the less clicks and, the system can just automate some of that for you. It's all about Salesforce automation, right? So automating as much as it is possible. The other thing is that you can require that they have pieces or things inside of Dynamics before they move on to the next stage. So at the end of the quote stage, if they don't have a quote, they can't move forward. Like they have to physically create the quote in the system and they have to like pull in that quote into the business process flow. So there are also like checks and balances where you can't create a proposal without a quote. So you got to create the quote in the system and add it, so it's really cool. And they have made some advancements and things like that to make it more for the user of how, these are the things and the steps that you have to get done in order to move forward. I think there's a lot left to be desired on business process flows. I wish that they would focus, maybe someday they'll come back around to them and make some improvements. Like you can't use multi-option set pick lists in business process flows, which is a bummer because sometimes you're like, I want to select all of these. These are all of the services they're interested in. You can't do that.
Right. Yeah.
So anyways, but there is some really cool automation or like forcing you to take behaviors within the system.
Yeah, I like that. And forcing you to take behaviors in a way, hopefully, that is guiding you and helping you, and not, as I said, not just because your boss wants you to do this thing, but then your boss isn't actually going to look at it in the system anyway. So why would you do it?
I think this whole podcast should have been about what your boss wants you to do versus, or just like telling sales leadership, don't do it just because you want it.
Right.
Yeah.
And I guess I will say we focus mostly on business process flows in the context of sales team. You can also use them in the context of a service scenario or really any other scenario that
any scenario. Like I'm working on
a process.
Project operations right now, and there's even a process flow for projects because you move a project through multiple stages until the end of it. So I guess I always think about it in sales. I specialize in sales. Shame on me. I always think of them first. Cases, customer service, but really anything, projects. I think you can add them to most records. Like, I don't know if there's like most record activities.
I think so.
Yeah. So.
You can also.
Anywhere you have a process, they're helpful.
In case anyone didn't know this, you can also spread across different tables, right? So you can start at, there's one out of the box that starts at a lead and then carries you into an opportunity, but you could do the same thing with anything else, like
a task
if you've got a task into a case, into a project, into a something else, and I feel like the branching is kind of nice too, because you can branch, like, depending on what happened here, I can branch into like, okay, now the process, because you picked this, like now it's an 8-stage process instead of a 3-stage process because it's more complicated or whatever. And like,
the branching. I always forget that, even though I always do it. Like, I don't know if almost every business process flow I build now has branching, and I always forget to bring up how cool and important that is because, again, you don't want to include things that aren't relevant. As soon as there's something irrelevant to the end user, they're going to shut their computer and stop using it. The other thing that I like about business process flows is you can require things in the business process flow without it being required on the table. So at this stage, it's required to know this data, but you could also have it on the form, but you don't want them to have to know that. Like the estimated revenue is a perfect one. Hey, I'm not quite sure how much this is going to be yet. It's on the form, visible, but I shouldn't have to know that to save that. But dang, when I get to the proposal, I need to know what the estimated revenue for this is. And so that at that point, you can then require that they fill that out. So it also adds in the flexibility to force your users to fill in the data when it's necessary, instead of just putting it on the form and praying that they're going to enter it when they need to.
Right. Or that they'll have to enter it to create the
put in a
record,
zero.
and then it's going to be wrong.
Let me put in a zero because I don't know yet.
Right. Let me just choose other from the list because I don't know, it's probably other.
Yep. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Anything else on... I feel like I'm really passionate about this one because it's so underutilized. I feel like I bring it up anytime I can because people just forget about them.
Yeah, it's a good point. And I feel like I fall victim to that myself, where I sort of forget about them. I'm like, oh yeah, like you could do a process flow, but like
it's more work.
I agree. I agree. It should be something to consider more frequently when there is a process you want to like step somebody through.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Anything else?
I don't think so. Thank you for your passion and knowledge in this area, Ashley.
Thanks for playing my game. Even though
you're
you
welcome.
hated every minute of it.
We're gonna play it again, and we'll see how you do.
I guess I should remember karma. Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for listening, and let us know if there's any games or things like that you think we should play.
Oh yeah.
We're trying to keep things fun and light, while also talking about our shared interests.
Thank you for listening to the Dynamics Hot Dish podcast. For additional content and previous episodes, check out our website at dynamicshotdish.com, follow us on Twitter at dynamicshotdish, and subscribe to our podcast for notifications. Thanks. See you next time.